Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm doing this video today about Shad Bala and how to interpret Shad Bala. I'm going to be looking at the chart of John Lennon, of course, who was a great singer, songwriter, of course, beloved, even some ways kind of spiritual leader. And I'm going to be looking at the at the chart of John Lennon, and we'll be using Shad Bala, as I said. I have a link here for you if you want to get a full course on this. I'm teaching this at the Sedona virtual Vedic astrology conference. Sedona, it was going to be held in Sedona, but now it's virtual, and I'm going to be teaching that. I put the link there. You would go, and of course, they have me on the same page here as Alan Anand, another astrologer who is teaching a class. But if you want to study the Shad Bala, you just click the link that I put there, and you go here, and you choose the Sam Jeppy, and then you, obviously, then you add it to cart, and there you go. But this Shad Bala system is really fantastic, and it allows you to really understand the planets based on like 7 different sources of strength. And in addition to teaching the Shad Bala overview, I'm also teaching or putting a special emphasis on what's called Dig Bala, or directional strength. And so, again, this is like a 6-hour course that you can get. And I'm going to show you how that system works if you're not aware of it today, using the chart of John Lennon. Now, we have John Lennon's information here. He was born on October 9th, 1940 at 6:30 p.m. in Liverpool. And that date and time renders, hang on a second, I just want to make sure of something here real quick. Pretty sure that was correct. One second. Yeah, October 9th, 1940 at 6:30 p.m. October 9th, 1940, 6:30 p.m. in Liverpool, right? Liverpool. So this shows where he has a Pisces rising, and then he's got Saturn, Jupiter retrograde here in the 2nd house in Aries. Moon is in the 11th house in Capricorn. Venus is in Leo. Mars, Rahu, Sun in the 7th house in Virgo, and then Mercury here in Libra in the 8th house. And when we look at Shad Bala, it's actually a way to analyze the planets based on 7 different criteria. One is called Sthana Bala, which means how strong the planet is standing. Sthana Bala, and even Sthana Bala is based on several criteria, which includes its exaltation, placement, its strength in different harmonic charts, its strength relative to angles, its strength in the Drekana chart, which is one of the harmonic charts. So there's that source of strength called Sthana Bala. Then there's Dig Bala, which is the directional strength. Like I've been saying, the directional strength means that planets have more strength when they're closer to certain angles. Again, there's a lot of principles and a lot of wisdom to be gleaned just by studying what the implications are of those criteria. Like, for example, we know based on directional strength on the Dig Bala that his Jupiter has pretty high Dig Bala because it's close to the 1st house. Anytime if you get it, and his Saturn will have low Dig Bala because Saturn has Dig Bala or directional strength in the 7th house, and it's very close to the 1st house. So we're going to look into the numbers here in a minute, but we would know that Jupiter has pretty high Dig Bala directional strength, and Saturn would have pretty low directional strength because one is very close to where it has the strength, and one is completely opposite where it has the strength. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on within that Shad Bala course. I'm going to dedicate like a couple hours, hour and a half or so, just focusing on the Dig Bala, on the directional strength, because that is so important. And it's something that you can see visually very easily, like we just did with John Lennon's chart, and it can tell us something very profound just based on the Dig Bala or the reverse Dig Bala. Those two things are what I look at very, very intensely. So, like I say, we know that his Jupiter, being very close to the first house, has high Dig Bala. So that means that no matter what happens in his life, the setbacks in his life, he's going to come through it with a sense of optimism and a sense of hope and a sense that, well, it'll all get better, it'll all work itself out, and it goes to increasing his learning and wisdom in life. That's why Jupiter has high Dig Bala near the first house, right? Saturn has low Dig Bala near the first house, which means at times he could be kind of cynical or kind of lose hope a little bit. So this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, again, it's already Saturn-Jupiter conjunction as well, which means one is hopeful, one is a little bit doubtful. But again, the fact that the Jupiter has more directional strength shows that ultimately, though, he's going to get more hope from this, right? It's going to be more hopeful than not because the planet with the directional strength is also very close. But those Saturn themes in his life can also, it can also show where he might be a bit fearful at times of doing certain things, because that's what happens when Saturn's directional strength is really low. So in addition to the Shad Bala, which is how strong the planet is standing, and the Dig Bala, which is the directional strength, we have what's called Kala Bala, which analyzes the planet based on like 8 or 9 different functions of time, different increments of time. So it shows that the planet is, certain planets are stronger relative to, a day or a night birth. Others are stronger based on whether it's waxing or waning moon or how bright the moon is. Others based on the year. Others based on the month. Or I'm sorry, not of the year, but there's a ruler of the year. That one gets strong. Then there's also the ruler of the month. There's the ruler of the day. There's the ruler of the hour. There's all these different things. There's the Ayana Bala, which means certain planets are strong closer to one Ayana, which is one solstice, or the other solstice. So again, that's a whole other way to measure the planet's strength through time, how it's aligned with its own timing strength, right? Because you see, as I say, like the Lord of the Day is always strong. So, for example, his Vara, he was born on Wednesday. So within the within the Kala Bala function, Mercury will get a lot of points because he was born on Wednesday, for example. And only Mercury gets those points there. So again, it's a whole way to measure these criteria. And I'm going to show you the chart in a second where, well, actually, I'll just show it to you real quick here to show you what's also going on here. You see, this is a printout from a computer which shows you all the different things that you can measure. This is a Shad Bala printout screen and all these different things. This is the Shad Bala and all of these criteria. Then there's Dig Bala, which I mentioned. And by the way, like I said, Jupiter would have high Dig Bala, 52 out of 60, very high, and Saturn would have low Dig Bala, 7 out of 60, right? Because Jupiter is very close to where he has directional strength, and Saturn is very far away from it. So again, these are the things that you can tell by looking at just on a cursory way to see whether the planet is going to move you forward or back. The other ones are kind of in the middle. Mercury is pretty low. Mercury has directional strength also in the first house, and you can see that it's in the 7th house in his chart. And the moon is also quite low because the moon has directional strength in the 4th house, and his moon was in the 11th house. So again, this is very, interesting way to analyze what's going on. And so let's see here. All right, so I see it looks like there's something going on with YouTube. I got to just keep going because now I'm doing it. So I'll upload it again later if there's something wrong with YouTube or whatever. So I can't deal with it right now. Okay, sorry. All right, so well, let me see here. I'm going to go back and then share his chart again. Okay, so again, we just looked at a few issues as well. As you see, Mercury is very close to the 7th house, so his directional strength is very low because Mercury has directional strength also in the 1st. And the moon has directional strength in the 4th house, and you can see it's over here by the 10th house. So again, this is how you would analyze those scores. And again, you see down here we have an overall score that shows how you rank the planets and their strengths relative to each other, and also, you know, it's an aggregate of, through these 7 different criteria, how strong it is. So we talked about Shad Bala, Dig Bala, Kala Bala, but there's also Chesta Bala, which, for example, retrograde planets have high Chesta Bala, because actually the slower the planet is moving, the more powerful it is. So the slower the planet is moving, the more powerful it is. So in this case, we have, you know, both Saturn and Jupiter will have high Chesta Bala because they're both retrograde. Chesta Bala also shows how bright the planet is and how close it is to the Earth, right? So these are a couple other principles that you learn. And you know, again, one of the reasons why it's also great to study something like Shad Bala, rather than just get this arbitrary score, is that you learn a lot of other principles, like the brightness. When planets are retrograde, they're very bright. But the easiest way to measure how bright they are and how much Chesta Bala they have is how fast they're moving, right? So again, the further the planet is from the Earth, the faster it's moving. So the slower the planet moves, the brighter it is, and the higher Chesta Bala it will have. So we would see that his Jupiter and Saturn would have high Chesta Bala because they're both retrograde. And these planets that are close to the Sun, Mercury, Venus, in particular, would have pretty low Chesta Bala in this case. And there's also what's called Naisargika Bala, which is the natural brightness. That's already fixed. So the Sun is the brightest, Moon is next, Venus is next, then Jupiter, etc. And they're just ranked according to brightness. Then there's what's called Dig Bala, which is the aspectual strength. So the aspects that planets get, whether they're favorable or unfavorable aspects, show assistance or obstruction. You know, like in his case, he'll have, you know, the Sun and Mars will be putting difficult aspects on each other, for example. And so we also have the aspectual strength, as I said. So again, what we can know and learn from his chart, even just by looking at the Shad Bala, we can then look at this idea and this fact of how we look at an overall score here, and you see this 1.04, 1.37. Each planet also has a threshold where it's trying to get to a certain level of like it has a certain amount of strength that it has to fulfill, and if it falls short of that, then it winds up being in detriment. So the Sun in this case winds up at least hitting its sort of bare minimum, which is 1 degree, which is 1.04. It barely gets over it. The Moon also 1.37. So it not only hits its minimum threshold, but it goes over it by a third. Mars also 1.29. Mercury 1.17. Its highest ratio is Jupiter, which is 1.45. Venus is also high, and Saturn is the only one that doesn't meet its requirement. Most of the time, you'll see people meet Saturn's requirement because his requirement is actually less than others. And I'll bring up that screen again just to show you how this works. In this printout, you can see how it'll have like a relative rank down here. and it has the minimum requirements of what are called Virupas. These are the ways that they measure. And you see Saturn has the lowest. Saturn and Mars have the lowest. Only 300 Virupas are needed to meet the threshold. Jupiter, I think, is it Mercury? Yeah, actually, Mercury has the highest level because Mercury gets some special favor, particularly in Ionia Bala and whatnot. And also the Sun has a high requirement here, 390, Sun and Jupiter. But you can see that he only meets, and you'll see here there's a percentage of the requirement that's fulfilled here, which is only 0.091. Now, again, the great thing about it and what you would learn in this class, I'll put the link there again for those who are on it live, that the reason that you want to really learn this and really understand it is because rather than just look at that bar graph that we looked at, which is what most people do with Shad Bala, is they look at that bar graph, and then that bar graph determines, they'll say something like, well, you can see it's low in Shad Bala, so that's not so good. One of those things, like we need more of that in astrology. We need more things like, oh, here is a simple number, and now let me put a simple judgment on it and not give any relevance to it, right? Oh, it's low. That's not good. Okay, well, what does that mean? What's not good about it? We see that a lot, in other things like in the Kuta score, like Kuta matching and other kinds of things where there's a lot of calculations, and then they crunch all those numbers into something that gives an overall indicator. So again, as we see here, if we want to look at that Saturn and we want to understand why it's low, well, here's a couple things. You can see that the Sthana Bala is low, right? See how low the Sthana Bala is. It's only 93. It's the lowest. And you can see a couple reasons why. Number one, it's very far away from its Ucha Bala, and in fact, it's debilitated. It was as far away from Ucha Bala, which means its exaltation strength, as it could possibly be because it was debilitated. So planets that are debilitated, especially if they're very close to the exact degree, and granted, exact degrees matter, but if they're very far away, like the opposite of the Ucha, then it winds up being a detriment. So again, there's a point threshold that you have to meet. I don't remember what it is for Sthana Bala, and each planet is different, but it doesn't meet it here. In fact, it's exactly opposite. So the Ucha Bala being so low means that Saturn doesn't get any Ucha Bala strength. You could see, for example, you see Mercury has high Ucha Bala because Mercury was in Libra. It was right next to where it's exalted. So again, the highest, most exalted would get 60, and the lowest would get 0. And you could see Mercury was a few degrees away in Libra, so it got 49.82, and Saturn was as far away as it could be, so it got 0. So this is one of the reasons why the Sthana Bala is so low. We also already looked at his Dig Bala, which was also very low, only 784. And again, if it's right on the exact place where it would be the highest, it would have close to 60 Virupas. Like we said, Jupiter was 52 because Jupiter has Dig Bala strength in the first house. But again, you can also see these different 6.29 and all this. These are mathematical equivalents close to the exact degree. So again, the highest degree that Jupiter could have with his directional strength, because he's got directional strength in the first house, would be exactly on the first house, right on the ascendant degree. That would be 60, right? It's a little bit off, so it's 52, but that's very high. And you saw that Saturn was about as far away as it could be. So instead of having 60, he only had 7.84, right? And we see the moon is almost just as low because the moon was in the 11th house, and it has directional strength in the fourth house. So the moon is also exactly opposite. So again, this is why I'm doing a whole special thing on Dig Bala in the class, and I'm going to talk about the exact ramifications of having planets exactly in the directional strength. So it's taking you in the direction you want to go, it wants you to go, and when it's completely opposite. Like, for example, the moon has the directional strength in the fourth house because the moon areas of life are the areas that want to connect us to the heart. They want to bring us in. They want us to be dialed into our intuition, which is the 4th house, moon and Venus. But when the moon is up there near the 10th house, like it was with John Lennon, then that connection to his heart and his family, even his mother and those kinds of things, are now something that's not taking him inside, but taking him outside, where he's like perhaps running away from it into his work, or trying to find love through the masses, and all kinds of stuff that can happen with a lot of entertainers, with a lot of celebrities and a lot of public people. They might be looking for love in some kind of public adoration, right? For example. So again, this is why the directional strength, the Dig Bala, is so important. It's very important to look at. And now you see Kala Bala here. And we have several different criteria. We have the day-night Nata Unata Bala, which is the day-night. We have the Paksha Bala, which certain planets are stronger, closer to different, of the moon being brighter or not. Tribhaga Bala, which is, I don't remember exactly which measurement that is. I have it written down, but there's a lot of them. Some of them are quite confusing. I think it's, throughout the day and the night, there are 3 different portions of the day and the night. That's what it is. I'm pretty sure. And then Varsha Bala, Varsha means year, which is the Lord of the year. I'm sorry, the Lord of the, it's the Lord of the year, but I don't remember the criteria, maybe the day of the year. But no, that's not right, because the day would be the Vara Bala. So I have the formula, but again, it's complex. Masa Bala means the month. And of course, the sun was, and as you can see, as we go through these Ayana Bala ones, I'm sorry, I always call Kala Bala Ayana Bala for some reason, but as we go through the Kala Bala, you'll see in many cases, only one planet gets the measurement. Okay. Like I said, he was born on Mercury's day. So Mercury gets the points for Vara Bala. Sun gets the points for Masa Bala. Venus gets it for Varsha Bala. Varsha means year. Hora Bala means the hour. The Hora, he was born in Mars's Hora. And then the Ayana Bala, they all get a score. This shows the planets are stronger based on whether they're closer to one Ayana or the other, the northern course or the southern course. So again, you can see the sun, or I'm sorry, you can see Saturn has very low Ayana Bala as well. It's possible to get 60. Like if a planet has its strength based on its proximity to the, let's say, summer solstice, and then the planet is right at the point where the summer solstice occurred, it would get 60 Varupas. If it's at the place that's opposite, which you see Saturn is close to it, then it winds up being very low. So again, you can see why, if you dig into the numbers, why Saturn's numbers are low and why he didn't meet the threshold. And then he also lost in a planetary war, it seems, to Jupiter here, Yuddha Bala. So we'll go back and look, but Jupiter and Saturn were in a Graha Yuddha, in a planetary war, and Saturn lost the planetary war, right? So then we have the Chesta Bala. We should expect it would be high, because remember, they were both retrograde. Both Jupiter and Saturn were retrograde. So we would expect Saturn would get some points here, and indeed he does. If the planets are 60, if they're retrograde, and actually depending on how fast retrograde they are, they would get 60. Opposite the sun is the most you would get, because that's when the planet is the most retrograde and moving the slowest. Okay, and so again, we have it here that both Saturn and Jupiter are the highest because they were retrograde. Nisargika Bala, like I said, these are fixed. So this shows the fixed brightness. The sun is the brightest, moon is next. Then we have Venus, Jupiter, etc. And so Saturn never gets much in Nisargika Bala. And then Dig Bala is aspectual strength, help or detriment. And Saturn got some help here. He's joined Jupiter. And they also calculate these aspects by intensity. And there was an opposition to Mercury, and then there was some other things going on with the aspectual strength. Then down here we have the total Shad Bala down here. Then it's converted into rupas, Then there's the minimum requirement. Then there's the percentage of the requirement, which is what we saw. Then you can go down and look at the percentage of the requirements down here. This is from the software called Parashara's Light. They do a really good job with this. So you can just go in and see which percentage of each of these 6 rankings or 5 rankings here. Oh, it doesn't have Ayana Bala because Ayana Bala doesn't have a percentage of, I mean, it doesn't have 2, 3, 4, 5. Shtana, Dig, Kala, Chesta, Drig, Nisargik Bala. Yeah, that's the one. It doesn't have Nisargik Bala because that one is already fixed. But you can see that Saturn got very low Drig Bala. He got less than 1 in pretty much all of them except Chesta Bala because he was retrograde. So you could see why he got below his rank, because he had to get at least 1 percentage, and he didn't in all of them except Chesta Bala. So again, this is this is a great way to really look at a chart in a way that you haven't looked at, and just look at the pure nature of the planets in ways that is a little bit a little different, so that you can really also understand Shad Bala beyond just this graph and beyond just these simplistic statements that you might make. So again, when we look at the chart of John Lennon, we can really see how this plays out, at least relative to his life. He had Pisces ascendant, K2 in the first house. So it was definitely pretty, he's the one who wrote like Nowhere Man, and, he was a musician and a great singer-songwriter who was definitely in his own world. And, you could see the creativity here, especially with, he has this very creative Mars, which is his 2nd and 9th house ruler, with Rahu here in the 7th house with the sun. In addition, when we look at the Shad Bala planets, the strongest ones, at least by ratio, that's what we would do. We have Jupiter and the moon here. They're both really powerful. Jupiter is his ruling planet, and it's also his 10th house ruler, which has to do with his work and his career, very ambitious. So you could see how much strength and how much, again, across many different ways of measuring. Again, when we just went through all of those Shad Bala components pretty quickly, and you saw it's not only standing strong, it's got directional strength. It's taking him in a direction that he wants to go. And especially it's his ruling planet, which, again, anytime the ruling planet is strong, it's going to fortify everything. And it's also his 10th house ruler, so it's going to also fortify his identity in his work, make him feel very, confident that he's moving forward with it. Although Saturn, the Saturn conjunction is also, brings a lot of determination and effort and also ambition. But it also led to other things. That weak Saturn definitely could be shown, especially in the weaker parts of his life, like he had issues with substances. He had some tumultuous relationships as well, for sure. He wound up being a very kind of transcendent, inspirational figure, as you could see with this Pisces ascendant and K2 in the first house. There's a rule, loose rule, but said whenever K2 is in Pisces, the soul can get liberation, right? Which is interesting. But that it's kind of like a liberated soul, like a jiva, or like a liberated mukti, jivan mukti, I should say. But we also, have, of course, Venus was also very powerful. I'm sorry, let me finish up with the moon. The moon was the 5th house ruler. I have to button that up. And it was also very strong in the Dig Bala, right? Because it wound up, getting 1.3 of its Shad Bala, I should say, not Dig Bala, Shad Bala. A few other things, of course. There's also, this is called a Gajakeshwari yoga between the moon and Jupiter, very important yoga as well. He also had other planets and angles from the moon, which means the moon is very supported here. The one thing that is low, as we saw, was that directional strength. It's the opposite direction. So he worked through quite a bit of emotional turmoil in his life. It's very sad for me because I remember when John Lennon was assassinated. I was a senior in high school, and it was one of the it was the first moment that I really dealt with death of something or someone who I really loved or admired. It's one of those moments that's really frozen in time, like, that sort of, John F. Kennedy moment. Where were you? Like, you'll never forget the moment you found out. There's a few of those moments in my life. Of course, 9/11 was one. When the shuttle Challenger exploded, that was one. But this was maybe the first one where it really shook me because, well, I love John Lennon's music, but especially at that time, what had happened is he had been through a big turmoil in his life, and he had just released another album. He had just released an album literally called Starting Over, and his music had just started to get resurgent. There were a couple songs on that album, one in particular called I'm just sitting here watching the wheels go round and round. I really love to watch them roll. I mean, you listen to that song, you can't help but get choked up about where he'd been in his life and where he was when that happened. And it just rips your heart out. John Lennon wasn't a politician. He was a musician. It was one of the greatest injustices that he got killed. He was singing about peace and love and bringing people together. And, you see some of these people get killed who, it's not like they deserve it. Nobody deserves to get killed, but man, that's a tough one when the man is just trying to sing about, again, beauty and love. And the thing about the Beatles and why they're so regarded, still so highly regarded, is their music wasn't just good music, and they were geniuses, singer-songwriters, but it was about the best of people, about the best that we could do. It wasn't cynical. They weren't cynical. They weren't, they were just beautiful little masterpieces. And John Lennon, after passing through some real tumultuous times with Yoko and whatnot, literally the album was called called Double Fantasy, I think is what it was called. Sorry. But one of the songs was called Starting Over. And then you had Watching the Wheels. I think that's what it's called. Just an amazing album. And it was happening. And it was like being moved by that music at that time. And then the man gets murdered. And I remember it was announced, of all places, on Monday Night Football. The most disconjointed, kind of insane announcement for something like this. And Howard Cosell, of all people, the announcer, delivered that message to the nation at the end of a football game. And it was like, what? You're watching a football game, and all of a sudden, John Lennon has been murdered. Anyway, but that's just, it was kind of hard to fathom, really. And so, but, that Saturn, Jupiter, this debilitated Saturn right on his ascendant. By the way, I'm not going to get into this now, but the way I work, I would consider Saturn defeating Jupiter in the planetary war, but I'm not going to open that can of worms here. But either way, this Saturn on his Lugna Lord here, that close, either way, shows how difficult this Saturn was for him in many ways. And literally, Saturn is a planet of death. It's got this very low directional strength in the first house. He was killed in Jupiter-Mercury Dasha, and Mercury is the ruler of all these planets here in the seventh house, including Mars, Rahu, the Sun, these malefic planets. Those three malefics in the seventh house, Jupiter, Mercury. Mercury's in the eighth house. So I'm not here to analyze his death, but to look at the Shad Bala here. But Certainly the low Saturn sticks out as being showing a lot of the problems in his life. If we look at the other planets, you could see, Venus, for example, quite powerful, like I said before, showing all that creativity and that love of creativity and of beauty, and of women and enjoyment. Also, Mercury is quite strong here. Mercury and Mars are both strong. A great sense of humor, a great wordsmith, very talented. So, the Shad Bala approach is quite an interesting approach. And again, I wanted to, do this because we do still have the some registrations. There's early bird pricing for to register for the Sedona conference. And again, if you want to do that, you can click that link there. You can go, and again, actually, we see this page here, and it has me and Alan Anand here, the other astrologer that's doing an intensive on Monday at the same time. So you just go down and select Sam Jeppy, and you'll learn this amazing system of doing readings. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is actually showing how to do several different types of readings, because I like to make things really, really practical, and this is a part of the manual. Here's the manual that I'm going to be working off of. We have some case studies and whatnot, and one of the things that I'm also going to be doing is I'm going to be showing how to do different kinds of readings as well. So not just learning how to do these things and how to understand that part of your software or what have you, so that you're not just blindly saying things like, oh, it's strong in Shad Bala, so whoopee, like that means a lot. But there are ways to actually take that information and do different readings where you can do entire readings just based on the Shad Bala information. For example, rank and file, which is where you notice the percentile rank, like I just showed you, right? Ranking each one by the strongest and the weakest, even just looking at the planets as karakas or indicators, and also house rulers, like this is the strongest, this is the next, like I was starting to do there. There's also compare and contrast planets with each other, especially as you might be looking at a certain trait like happiness, confidence, optimism. Again, you can look at things that affirm that, like, for example, the Shtana Bala, which is how strong it's standing. And you can really see Shtana has to do with things like confidence. So does Dig Bala, directional strength of like where you're moving, right? Like you could do entire readings based on, confidence and direction, right? Just by looking at the Shtana Bala and Dig Bala of all the planets, right? And highlighting that. It's very powerful, especially as you understand what the planets really mean beyond just the simplistic, Jupiter's a good one, Venus is this one. When you get into the rulerships and other things that you know about planets, this Shad Bala information can really help open your mind to entirely new ways of doing readings and everything else. You could also do like issues like career, relationships. So, for example, you could assess Venus and the seventh lord and compare them based on the Shad Bala factors. Like, for example, Venus and the seventh lord and the Shtana Bala. So how well do you stand, like standing favorably and with integrity in relationships? The direction, let's say, in relationships based on the Dig Bala of Venus and the seventh lord. Or things like, the timing in the relationships, because the Kala Bala has a lot to do with timing, right? Like whether it's close to the solstice or whether it's the Lord of the Day or something like that, it has to do with timing, right? Support, right? Like the Chesta Bala is also the focus, right? Like the speed if one of the planets is retrograde or something like that, how much focus and concentration you put, how much assistance and support, which is the Dig Bala, because it has to do with aspects. So again, all kinds of different ways to do it. I have one that's just the Dig Bala life direction reading, which I'm going to be showing that as well. That's why I'm doing a special intensive just on the Dig Bala, because again, that's such an important way to see like where you're going in your life and where you get off track, what gets you off track, what gets you back on track. So again, so much valuable information, and it's going to be really practical. It's not just theoretical. Again, just like I did here, I used John Lennon's chart, and we kind of went around it a little bit, but you could see very clearly how using these factors, you could get a very strong idea of how this ratio of energy was moving through his, through his life. And again, you can really notice it like with those directional strength ones, like I mentioned, like again, the moon is opposite. So he's looking for connection maybe in things that are public and how that can be unsettling, how Jupiter was close to the directional strength. So it really, kept him optimistic, even though he had a lot of hardship. But the other ones are also really important. So again, this was an overview, barely 40 minutes of me going over this. We're going to dedicate, like 6 hours to lay this out for you, make it so that you understand all the different components of Shad Bala, and then, of Shad Bala, and then we're going to show you how to do different readings as well. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to look and see. People had said there was some problems with YouTube or something. I'll look and see. If it is, I'll just re-upload it if you didn't see it or something. But anyway, again, register for the course. You'll really like it. It's at your home. You don't have to travel anywhere, and you get a recording of it that you have the recording for the rest of your life. So again, this is the greatness of this kind of teaching and this kind of learning, is that it's better even than traveling to conferences and stuff where you have to go. And then, I mean, we love the conferences because we get to meet people, but as far as learning experience, these virtual things are much better because you get a recording, you have it forever. You don't have to worry that you didn't take enough notes. And by the way, even if you're going to see other students, see other teachers, you could still buy this and get the recording later. You don't have to show up in real time. So keep this in mind. We live in an era where we have all this technology and all this possibility, and we still act like we're prohibited by a schedule. So there's no reason to think that. You're actually, you can attend in real time, but you're also buying a recording. You'll get the recording and you'll have it forever. So again, invest in yourself, invest in astrology a little bit. People got to digest more free stuff. Oh, a free thing. Oh, that was good. Now, and you don't learn it. Again, it's just life is passing you by. Learn some of this stuff really well. Invest in it. Invest in yourself. For this money, you'll have this powerful teaching and understand this powerful framework for the rest of your life. Very, very valuable. Okay. So again, whether it's my class or other classes, start investing in this education. It'll change your life, and it can change the lives of others around you as well, especially if you start to really master this stuff and apply it. This is what we're here to do. You're here to actually know this, understand this. And again, the great thing also about teaching all of that stuff that looked really complicated, it's complicated, but the thing is, it's not that complicated. You're just learning something, but you're also learning all these principles, and you see all these principles reinforced over and over again. All these principles are reinforced. Like, for example, brightness. Brightness is a principle. You see, there's a whole part of the Shad Bala that's dedicated to it, right? Called the Nisargika Bala, which is, it's just fixed. Based on the brightness of the planet, there's a score that's already fixed. But you see that reinforced by things like Shad Bala, because retrograde is also when the planet is brighter. And you also see, for example, that the Shad Bala of the sun and moon, because they never go retrograde, is actually based on their brightness, right? So you'll see that principle reaffirmed. You see other principles reaffirmed, like the directions, right? Like the directional strength or it's furthest away from it, or different facets of time, different facets of like the benefic and the malefic influences. Again, it comes down around very, very powerful rudimentary principles that you should understand how important they are. Things like the paksha of the moon, whether it's the day or the night, whether the moon is bright or dark. These are very important things that most students don't understand. And until you start dissecting these systems, this is a system. Until you start dissecting these systems, you're just flailing, really. You listen to me or listen to other astrologers say things, but again, at some point when you actually use your brain and concentrate it on a bunch of systems, and you start to see, then these principles snap into place, and then you have a much deeper appreciation for the whole science, and it's not just some kind of thing you're feeling and playing around with. You're actually learning it. And I will tell you this as well. Learning things like this is some of the most rewarding things you'll ever do. Because again, it's very tempting to just kind of stay lazy a little bit and look at that chart on Shad Bala and look at that and be like, okay, this or that. But when you actually really just concentrate your mind on it, right? It's such a great feeling of accomplishment, because you're like, wow, I actually understand this. I've actually learned that thing that looked so complicated, that thing that just looked like a bunch of numbers that I could never get my head around. I actually can read this. I actually understand what all this is. And you can. And I want you to. You certainly can. So you'll be able to go in there and look and see. And again, now it looks like, how in the world could I ever make sense of this? But that's what we're going to do. So this will make sense to you. Not only make sense, but you'll be able to interpret it. You'll be able to understand it. You'll even be able to look at someone's chart, look at their Shad Bala, the real printout, and be able to, bring out a lot of nuance in the chart that you really should be able to, especially if you're doing astrology at any level where you feel like you're somewhat competent or something, and you don't really get this. You should get it. You should know what this is. If you ever think about, well, but Shad Bala is this or that, Shad Bala that, and you don't really know this, you should probably either be quiet about Shad Bala or learn it. Because again, it's just kind of, it's meant to be learned. And again, because we take a lot of shortcuts now, especially with complicated things, in astrology, there's a lot of it. We want to look for something where there's a score, like an Sharvashtaka Varga score, so we can say, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. And we don't even really know what we're saying or what it's based on. So again, I don't want to go off too much on that, but I'm just trying to implore serious students. And it's because I respect you and I know what you want. You want to understand this stuff. So invest in yourself and learn this, okay? So I'm looking forward to teaching it. And I'm looking forward to having many of you there and seeing your understanding of Shad Bala and astrology and these deeper principles expand by leaps and bounds. And that only happens when you dedicate yourself to it and really apply yourself to the teaching. So